Hi, I'm Dana Stengel. I'm an urban wildlife specialist and I'm the executive director of Taringa Ranch. We do local native wildlife education in Los Angeles. Today we're going to talk about coyotes. What is up with coyotes? Coyotes in the backyard, my neighbors telling me stories of their little dog being taken by a coyote. Suddenly I'm seeing them in the street, I'm seeing them in the neighborhood. It's confusing, right? Well, there's a lot to know about the coyote. He's a super interesting animal. Did you know that coyotes have been urban since ancient Mexico? In Tenochtitlan, you can find evidence of coyotes living right alongside human beings. So coyotes have been around people for many, many years, and they are still going to be around people for many, many years. Did you know that their natural history actually follows humans? They're very interested in the trash and the food that we leave behind and the rodents that are attracted to that. So, what do you need to know about coyotes? People often ask me why the coyotes are in the city. Why aren't they out in the wild where they belong? Coyotes have followed humans for many, many years. And there is a study going on right now in Cook County, Illinois, where they're studying the coyotes living among the high rises. This study comes out of Ohio State University. They're putting GoPros on the coyotes and tracking devices. So they're able to see not only where these coyotes are in the landscape, where they're dispersing, where they're going, where they're living, what their movement patterns are, but they're able to see life from the point of view of the coyote, which is super interesting stuff. They're watching how they decide to cross a busy street, how they interact with other members of their pack, and the information that's coming out of this study is absolutely incredible. What they have learned is basically that the coyote is more successful on the urban landscape than he is in the rural, more wild landscape. So let me just repeat that again. Today's coyote is more successful on the urban landscape than he is in the wild. So they're going to be here. So our job now is to figure out, how do we peacefully coexist with these guys? Are they coming right for us? Why is the coyote here? First of all, let's consider what the coyote eats. He's an omnivore, so he can eat a variety of foods. And any animal that hunts prefers to not hunt if he doesn't have to. And when he does have to, he's going to go for the smaller prey when he can. So the coyote is omnivorous. A good part of his diet is vegetable matter. A good part of his diet is trash and food that he finds around. And a good part of his diet is food that he scavenges, like roadkill and other stuff. But he can definitely be attracted to the household area by things like water, things like ponds, things like water that you might leave out for your pets overnight, and any sort of standing water that could be gathering in buckets, even swimming pools, right? What else might, food-wise, could bring the coyote to your yard? Maybe you have a cat that goes outside. The average life expectancy of a cat that goes outside is 2 to 5 years. There's cars, which are much faster than coyotes. There are coyotes. There are dogs. There are all sorts of things that can happen to a cat that goes outside. So while there are many cats that go outside that live to be older than 5, the average is 2 to 5 years. So my suggestion for cats that like to be outside and like to roll in the grass is for their guardians to create a catio for them to keep them safe and also to keep coyotes from wanting to come into the yard for them. The other food items that could bring a coyote into the yard are birdseed. How could birdseed bring a coyote into your yard? Coyotes don't eat birdseed, do they? Birdseed attracts birds. Birdseed also attracts rodents. and birdseed attracts other animals that coyotes might be interested in. Squirrels, gophers, all sorts of different rodents. Birds, a coyote will catch a bird if he can, and opossums and raccoons and other animals that will come into the yard for either the rodents or for the rodent food. Another food item that can bring a coyote into the yard is cat food or dog food, but mainly it seems like people leave cat food out for outdoor cats or indoor-outdoor cats or whatever. When you leave this kibble out, again, not only is the kibble interesting to the coyote, but whatever's coming in to eat that kibble is also interesting to the coyote. So leaving food out overnight is another magnet for bringing a coyote into the yard. We're going to talk a little bit more about feeding coyotes. One place that people really like to feed wildlife is at the park. Maybe they're at the park on a family picnic. Maybe they go to the park every weekend. They see wildlife there. Sometimes it's a squirrel, sometimes it's something larger like maybe a coyote, and they will throw food in the general direction. This is basic animal training. What happens in that moment is the animal is watching the food be thrown by the human being. Now there's an association between food and the human being. Eventually, either that human being or another human being is going to be more brave, and they're actually going to approach the animal with the food in their hand. Now, an even stronger connection is being made between the animal and the food and the human. And a direct connection is being made between the animal and the hand of the human. Now you're at a park, and who else is at the park usually? Kids are at the park usually. And what do kids love to do? They love to eat. And little ones especially are often walking around with bits of food in their hands, right? They're walking around, they're not paying attention, they smell like peanut butter. And that coyote that lives in that park now associates hands with food. Every time I have read about an attack that's happened involving a coyote and a person, it's always in the hand area or in the thigh area where the hand touches the leg. It's never in the neck area, which is generally where a canine would attack if he was trying to actually injure or hurt the individual that he was going for. So when these attacks happen, they're usually on the hand area or on the thigh area, and it's because the animal was going for what it thought was food for himself. People will say that they have a problem coyote in their neighborhood. And the thing is that any individual, human or animal or whatever, can be a problem unless they have the right training, right? So it's up to us to sort of train the wildlife in our area to stay away from the places that we live. They're canines, and they're curious, and they're very interested in what we're doing. And they're going to be around. And people will ask me, well, why can't we just take that one out? Why can't we just humanely move that one? Or why can't we just deal with that one in whatever way animal services or the county might deal with a coyote, right? And the reason is coyotes are biologically very interesting animals. So they have this loose pack dynamic where they generally hunt on their own. Sometimes they will hunt or hang out in a loose pack with their other family members. But they're very aware of who their family is, where their family is, and what's generally going on with the pack. When something happens where one or two or more members of the pack are removed, either killed or trapped and moved out, but for whatever reason, the rest of the pack wasn't expecting this to happen, and for the pack it becomes a sort of a trauma. And in general, when everything's going well, the coyote will have about 2 babies every year. But if you upset the pack dynamic, the next denning season can produce up to 14 babies. So now you've gone from one problem coyote to 14 more. So again, we come back to what do we do about the ones that are here? And how do we live with them so close to where we live? So a little bit about the coyote pack. Sometimes you hear them all. Sometimes you're sitting there having dinner or getting ready for bed, and all of a sudden, it's mayhem out there. It is a cacophony of almost every living thing that can make a noise all of a sudden just going up in your neighborhood. And it happens in every neighborhood, all the way from the most rural neighborhoods in Los Angeles to the most urban. You have heard the cacophony of coyotes, I know. A lot of people will message me and say, I hear this at night and I'm really afraid of this sound. When I hear it, I think that an animal is being killed in that moment and it scares me. And the thing that you need to know about coyotes is, similarly to wolves, they each have their own voice. And so what happens, usually in the evening hours, is they wake up and they're like, oh, what a beautiful day. I wonder where everybody is. I wonder what everybody's doing. I think I'll check. And so they start yipping. And they start yipping. They're like, hey, Mike, where are you? And then Mike howls back, yip, 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 I'm over here. Where are you? Yip, 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 I'm over here with Amanda. Everything's going great. And everybody is excited about the night. And this, just like we have email and Facebook, this is how coyotes communicate. So when you hear it, just know that all that is communication at night. Because murder is never loud, right? We've all watched Dateline. When murder happens, it's quiet. It's quiet. It's quiet. You might hear the quick cry of the animal that's being killed, and then it's going to be silent again. Because the coyote doesn't want to share his meal if he did get something. He's going to quietly sneak off and eat it because that's what coyotes do. So today we're going to talk about the connection between rodenticide and mange. And we're going to talk about what rodenticide is and how it works. So this is a rodenticide box, and you can find these throughout the city and the county and the state. They're outside of businesses, they're at parks, they're everywhere. And they look all sleek, and a lot of people assume that because they have this fancy little door, that the rodent probably goes in and doesn't come out. But that's not what happens. What happens is the rodent goes in, he gets his little bait treat, he comes out, and he dies a slow death. And while he's dying that death, often a predator will spot him and pick him up and eat him. Now that predator has rodenticide in his system. If the predator is small, like a hawk, he'll just die. And then something else will eat him, and then it will have rodenticide. If it's a larger animal, like a coyote or a bobcat, it'll eat several of these rodenticide-laden rodents before it gets sick. And it won't really fall prey to the rodenticide in the same way that a rodent will. What happens is his defenses get knocked down because of the rodenticide, and then his body is open to diseases that occur in the wild, like mange. And then what happens is the mange will eventually kill the coyote. And a lot of times, people will see these animals in their backyards because a mangy bobcat or a coyote is looking for an easier meal. So he's much more likely to be in a backyard than a healthy bobcat or coyote. And you can tell because their eyes are crusted, it's harder for them to see, their fur starts coming out, and it's not pretty. But what it comes from mainly is exposure to rodenticide. And over 90% of the wildlife in LA County and pretty much in the state of California has been exposed to one or more forms of rodenticide. All right, so now we're going to talk about the backyard a little bit. A lot of people ask me, how can I keep my backyard coyote proof or wildlife proof? How can I keep all the wildlife out of my backyard? And my answer is always, you pretty much can't. It doesn't matter if your backyard is super small or really big, it's hard to keep all wildlife out of your backyard. And so I don't usually recommend it. One way that people use that it's sort of effective, it can be helpful, it can also be costly, is the coyote roller fence. This is an example of it, and basically people will put it around the perimeter of their fence, and the animal trying to get over the fence cannot gain purchase, and so it'll slip down. It's very well made, it's very smooth. I've seen homemade versions of this that are not quite as smooth but may do the same job. My concern with this is if you've got an animal that's small, like a cat or a smaller dog, a great horned owl can just fly right over that, and then it's not really helping you anymore. The other thing is, depending on how large your yard is, this could be really expensive, and so again, it may not be the answer for every backyard. What I suggest instead of trying to protect the whole backyard is trying to protect a small section of the backyard. The first thing is, if there is a doggy door being used, we have to stop using the doggy door. Because if the doggy door is being used, we don't know when our dog is outside. And in a world of coyotes, it's important to know when your dog is outside. What I do like for dogs or cats that need to be outside for some reason, unsupervised, I like a dog run, easy dog run that you can buy at any local retailer, with a chain link lid over the top of it. The chain link attachment on top of the dog run prevents animals from flying in, from climbing in, from falling in, from jumping out, whatever the case may be. Chain link with shade cloth. Now, if you really need to use the doggy door, you can create a tunnel that goes to your protected area. But without some sort of a protected area, most of the time, wildlife can get into the yard and will get into the yard, and so you just need to be aware of that. Another thing about fences, I get a lot of questions about how tall should the fence be? What should it be made of? The answer is, these things don't really matter in the world of wildlife, because wildlife has all different ways of getting into your backyard. Maybe it's going to jump, maybe it's going to climb, maybe it's going to fly. It doesn't matter, but some wildlife will find its way in. And the other thing about fences is a lot of people feel like, well, if my fence is 15 feet tall, then I don't have to worry anymore, right? The thing is, when people put fences in, usually the first thing they do is try to cover their fence with foliage of some sort. They're putting in trees, they're putting in bushes, they're putting in flowers. Maybe they're about to build something, so they stack their stuff over against the fence to keep it out of the way. Maybe they got firewood. That's usually stacked against the fence. So what we do with our fences is we usually create stairways on either side of them, allowing wildlife in without realizing what we're doing. So fences, while we think they're great for keeping everything out, when it comes to wildlife, even a tortoise can climb a chain link fence. So, other things you can do in your backyard to make it less palatable for wildlife, right? So the first thing you have to ask yourself, why is it in my backyard? What's bringing it in? Is it the water? Is it the food? Is it my pet? What is it? So we try to get rid of those things. Then we add another layer, and that layer is deterrence. And there's a wide variety of deterrents that can be used in the backyard for different animals. I brought a few with me today. This one is called the scarecrow, and there are a variety of models of this available. I don't know if you've seen the movie Over the Hedge, but basically when the wildlife tries to get into the yard, they've got a bunch of these, and all of a sudden the wildlife comes in, it's motion sensing, it's a sprinkler with the water. And even animals that love water, like raccoons, do not love being sprayed right in the face with it. And this goes into the ground, and so this little head is pretty much eye level with a coyote or a big raccoon. So this is a great backyard deterrent, because what we're doing is we're breaking habits. Again, this animal has been coming into the yard for one reason or the other. Now when he comes into the yard, he's being sprayed with water. That's training. And it's not fun anymore. So again, why is the coyote in the backyard? It's dark, it's quiet, I can find stuff there. So we've talked about the water deterrent. Now we've got the noise and light deterrent. And what happens with this is it's also motion sensing. This one is called the critter getter. What I like about it is it's mobile. You can attach it to your fence, you can attach it to your house, you can put this anywhere where you know the animal is coming in and out of the yard. And of course you don't do it when your dog is in the yard. So basically what this thing is a strobe light and a very loud noise. And so an area that the animal is used to being able to quietly sneak into, he is no longer able to quietly sneak into, and it's no longer fun. This is enough to scare an animal so much that he does not want to come back into your backyard again, especially if there's nothing else inviting him in. How else can we train the problem coyote in our neighborhood? What we can do is employ humane hazing devices and maneuvers. So basically, again, what is a coyote or any other wild animal thinking about when he looks at us? What does he see? What is he thinking about? Usually, if it's a canine like a coyote, he's curious, especially if we have another canine next to us. So he's going to be interested. He's going to look, he's going to listen. He may stop for a minute. He may look really bold. And in that moment, we have a training opportunity for that canine. Are we going to stand there and let him continue to stare at us and get closer because he's curious? Or are we going to keep him wild? Because that's the best thing for him and that's the best thing for us. We're going to keep him wild. And so if we see him around our home or around our area regularly, we can keep something near the door that we can, when we see him in the street, we can open up our door and we can be like, hey. One of my favorites is the old bike horn, right? Having a bike horn is a great wildlife deterrent. Wildlife doesn't like that. Wildlife isn't expecting that, and that is a great way to get that coyote to turn around and make the decision to run away. And now you've trained him. People with their pets are scary, and I shouldn't approach them if I'm a coyote. Also, at the dollar store, you can find an air horn. This is a great way to deter a coyote from your area. And cheap. Coyotes hate bells. The old standard penny can. You can recycle your cans, fill them with pennies or bolts or stones or anything that makes noise. Give it a shake. Coyote's not expecting that either. One thing that's really important with humane hazing is that you have buy-in, right? Like you can't just be like, get away, coyote. Get away, coyote. You have to be serious. You have to be the boss in this situation, right? And the person who can be the boss in this situation doesn't even need a humane hazing device, right? If I see a coyote and he's looking at me funny, I'm gonna be like, yeah! That's all I need to do. I just need my body. But if maybe I'm a more timid person and I don't think that I have that in me, having my little helper is helpful, right? So then I can use my body language and I can use the humane hazing device at the same time. Yeah! That's really scary to even another human. But what happens when I'm not in my backyard anymore? What happens when I'm out walking the dog? What can I do? What steps can I take to make sure that my walk is a little safer? So, the very first thing is to be an active dog walker. Don't be walking your dog while you're catching up with your phone calls for the day, while you're doing other stuff, right? You need to be involved. This is your family member. You should be looking at him. You should be engaging with him. You should be having some time with him. If you're over here talking to Brenda and your leash is out here, you don't know if an animal has just taken your dog off the end of the leash. You have no idea. So pay attention when you're walking your dog. The other thing is, I really don't recommend retractable leashes. They're cute, I get it, they're handy, the leash just reels right up in there. It's the best thing since sliced bread. One of the problems is that the leash gets very, very long and you can lose sight of your animal. Another part of the problem is it's got a mechanism in there. And if that mechanism fails in the moment that you're trying to get your animal closer to you, you're going to have a problem. Also, on your dog, I don't necessarily want to see the leash being attached to the collar because nobody likes being dragged around by their neck. A collar is great for identification tags, but when you're walking your dog, especially in an area where you know there are coyotes, which is all the areas of Los Angeles, he should have a halter on, a sturdy leash. This is an example of a sturdy leash that has a poop bag, because you shouldn't be walking without your poop bag. It's not too long for me to be unaware of where my dog is, and I believe the law in LA is 6 feet. You don't want it longer than that. Rattlesnakes. Sturdy, not a retractable leash. This is a perfect example of a leash that's good for walking a medium-sized dog. Also, don't walk without a humane hazing device on your person. Not even just for coyotes. You're very likely to encounter a dog that's off leash. What I like to do is carry something with me that will produce an effect that is unexpected to the wildlife or the dog that I might encounter. Of course, I have to condition my own dog to it in advance so that I'm not scaring my dog also while we're on the walk. Couple of examples of personal humane hazing devices that have worked for me in the past are little air horn. This can go around your neck so your hand's free. You blow in it and it's very loud. That will scare wildlife away. Another thing I like is a stun gun. I can fit it. It has a belt loop. So it's hands-free, but if I need to use it, what I like best about this is the noise that it makes. I have never had to aim this at anything, but if an animal is coming at me or a person, all I have to do is make that scary noise, and they're not interested anymore. And finally, one of my favorite humane hazing devices is a handy umbrella. It's great for hiking. It might rain. You could be ready. It's definitely going to be sunny. You could be ready for that. But if you encounter wildlife, even something as big as a mountain lion or a bear, but definitely a coyote, you can use an umbrella. And we never get to see this end of the umbrella. We only get to see this end of the umbrella. But it could be pretty scary if it's coming right at you. That's my favorite. Coyotes are an emotional topic for many people. Either people have lost an animal or they know someone who has lost an animal. Our pets are like our family members, so it can be really hard, and people have a lot of very strong feelings about coyotes in their midst. The reality is we have control over protecting our animals. We can do it. The power is in our hands. And we also have the power to learn more about these incredible animals so that we can understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. My suggestion for a great resource for learning about coyotes is Coyote America. by Dan Flores. It's a great book. Also, pay attention to social media. Social media can be a very interesting and very scary thing. Not everything you read on social media is true, or maybe it's just one point of view. Make sure you question the sources where you receive information and try super hard not to feed into negativity that can be caused on social media sites. Because in the end, it doesn't benefit people and it doesn't benefit coyotes.